Hello, everyone. I'm Osa Tui. I'm the president-elect of HSTA, and we're here with President Corey Rosenlee in the final days of his presidency. Thanks for joining me, Corey. We just want to have a little chat with you as you begin to ponder your next steps. So let's begin. First off, can you talk to us about why there's a transition here, a presidential transition here at HSTA?
Yeah, so basically, for the presidency, the term is you have 2 terms of 3 years. So I am term limited out. That's the reason why you have the transition. All
right, yeah, we've heard some from members. What happened to Corey? Why is he leaving us? Or what happened to him? Did something happen? So yes, it is a matter of you're not able to run again. So what's next up for you? What are you going to be doing?
So I'm going back to Campbell High School to be teaching social studies. I'm having to dig out my old lesson plans and try to remember some of the essential skills there. I am glad, though, that at least my classroom this time will be air conditioned, and that's one of the nice changes. And I'll continue to fight for education.
Absolutely. What are the classes you're going to be teaching?
Cross my fingers. I've heard different stories, but my favorite class to always teach is sociology. So I'm teaching two sections of sociology, psychology, primarily to 12th graders, which I like. And this is the hope. I'm teaching participation in democracy and modern history of Hawaii. I hope I get that instead of world history. No offense to all of you world history teachers, but that one, I never really was my cup of tea on that one.
Well, one thing with going back to the classroom is you get to do EES again after having 6 years off from it. So congratulations.
I know. Actually, I always feel bad for the vice principal that has to get and evaluate me because it ends up being a 2-hour conversation on educational theory.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
I know, the poor soul.
With everything you've learned over the years, are you going to be able to integrate any of that into your curriculum or your lessons as you exit the presidency?
So for those of you who don't know, that during my presidency, I actually had to renew my national board. And I had to borrow a classroom from one of my old student teachers. And it was so interesting because I thought, what a great time to reteach things. And for those of you, I don't want to date anyone. There used to be this great cartoon called Schoolhouse Rocks. And there was one called I'm Just a Bill. And so I actually, during my national board recertification, showed the students I'm Just a Bill, and then told them, ignore that, because that's not the way it works. And I was trying to tell them, you think about how things work at the legislature, and I was teaching them, you've got to reach out not just to any legislator, but the committee chairs. And so I actually was working with my students for my recertification about how they can get the issues that they care about done. And I think a lot of the things I've learned in office about what's a legislative priority versus the city council priority, I was able to share. And I think that's something that I could definitely take back into the classroom.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's also things related to sociology and psychology that you'll be able to use as well. So thinking back, 6 years, what was your progression in HSTA? What did you do before you became president? And tell us a little bit about that.
Well, a little bit of background. My mom, she was a special education teacher. She taught at Wilson Elementary and Princess Kailani. My dad, he was a social work professor at UH and started an agency called Adult Friends for Youth. So I always say I sort of got the teaching from my mom and the social activism from my father. And so, for a long time, I was trying to do a combination of all of that. I remember when I first got to Campbell and I was sitting in a classroom and it's, 100 degrees in the classroom. And I just couldn't believe that they would put children into that kind of environment. I mean, it was just, I was doing the best I could to teach, but the kids had their heads down because it was just so hot. I couldn't blame them. So I started to do that way back when I first was teaching, was we did a rally back then to try to get air conditioning. And then back then there was an economic crisis. And that's when Linda Lingle was doing the Furlough Fridays. So I took my family and my young little daughter and joined other parents in a sit-in in the governor's office. And, you know, even that started the conversation about how do we properly fund education, even back then. And, you know, I was glad even after that, we still fought for the air conditioning. I fought for making sure we kept our social studies credits. At one point, they're trying to cut participation in democracy. And I think we've seen over this last presidential election how important it is to teach kids about democracy. And, you know, at the same time, when Governor Abercrombie cut, you know, teacher salaries again and imposed a contract, you know, I took sort of the experience I've had with the other protest movements to launch a work to the rule movement. And I think that went a lot to other schools. And at that time, that's when I started to think, okay, what organization in Hawaii has the possibility to actually fix these things? And that's when it dawned on me, you know, the best organization to do that is HSTA. And that's when I decided to run for president.
Yeah, and you were a part of the Government Relations Committee as well. Is that right? And then you were a board member. And then
yeah, so as I started to get involved as an activist, I started for the first time to attend HSTA meetings.
Mm-hmm.
I always wish I had actually joined much earlier, because I think I would have really been, you know, it was really the things I enjoyed, talking about government relations and being with other people that cared about our government. And so I was on the Government Relations Committee for a year, and I was on the board of directors for a year before I became president.
Yeah, so that was before you became president, and then you became president. So what do you think were your biggest accomplishments during your presidency?
So internally, I think the first thing that I'm really proud of is this. You know, I'm really proud how we have come together as a union. And we were tested during my presidency. The Supreme Court passed the Janus case, which basically said, you know, you don't have to pay to be part of the union. And I was really afraid that people would just want everything for free and not be part of it. And I get touched up by this because so many members of our union chose to stay part of HSTA. And while official records, you know, are not kept, from conversations that we've had, we believe that HSTA probably has the highest percentage of members of any teacher union in the entire United States. I think that says a lot about Hawaii and how we value a union. And I would say this too, that unity is our greatest strength. I think during my presidency, one of the things I've always heard is that oftentimes teacher voice was ignored. And so, you know, during my presidency, we had 6,000 teachers march on the state capitol. I think we had over 16,000 pieces of testimony submitted by our members on a variety of bills, but, you know, specifically on bills trying to increase funding for schools. When the pandemic came up and there was a question about face mask use and social distancing, at the same time, you know, they were trying to cut the differentials for special education, hardest staff in Hawaiian immersion. We reached out to our members, and I think it was close to 3,000 to 4,000 teachers sent in testimony. And we noticed that over the whole year, teachers were doing it. So I'm really glad that within our union, you know, we were able to stay together and we were able to fight together. And I think that's the most accomplishment internally that I'm happiest with.
Yeah, absolutely. That was great. What about broader scale accomplishments? What's your most important one, maybe?
Well, the thing I always wanted to accomplish the most is this. I think it's just a basic right that every child should have access to a quality education. I can always say this, that I can always think about the things I wasn't able to accomplish. But the things I was proud of, probably the thing I'm proudest of is the differentials. It has tremendously bothered me that if you're a child that's, say, for example, 20 minutes away from my home, you have the Leeward Coast, where students year after year are denied access to qualified teachers. And trying to create the differential of $8,000 to teachers that teach out on the Leeward Coast that Waianae are not a Cooley. I think that's a great accomplishment. And same thing for special education or Hawaiian immersion. So I'm really proud of the differentials. I'm really proud that during my presidency, we've gotten 2,000 rooms air conditioned. We made our schools more energy efficient. And as I'm speaking, there is a House Bill 613 that creates the funding that was passed. The governor may veto it, but that creates enough funding to finish the job when it comes to air conditioning all of our schools. And so I'm still hoping that we get that through and we still advocate for that. One of the things that I'm really proud of too is that, when I came into office, there was more and more pressure on standardized testing. And, in the last 6 years, we've delinked standardized testing from teacher evaluations. We moved the punishment of schools if they didn't get high enough test scores. And something that's still going on right now is trying to transition from the, bubble test to going to authentic-based, project-based learning. And so those are some of the things I'm, really happy that as a union and through our unity, we're able to accomplish over the last 6 years.
Absolutely. Those are very important for our teachers, and it affects the lives of our students. And so thank you for that. Those are great things. But is there anything you regret or didn't accomplish? Or
Yeah, that's a longer list. I'll go over the easier one first. I think I really, really wanted to end compression. And for those that are unaware, I think most of the people watching this are, but we have teachers with 10 years different experience getting paid the exact same salary. And that really creates, a difference between why teachers are paid poorly in Hawaii. 3 times during my presidency, we were close, okay? I mean, like hours away from finally getting compression fixed. And in each case, there was this twist that would happen. The pandemic was one of them. When the pandemic changed, we were close at that point to finally getting fixed. And so I'll leave that as a regret. The other one that I came into my office, and this was the priority that I had the most, that when I came into president, that I wanted to fix. Again, it really bothers me, the inequity that we have in education. That, on the mainland, it's between 2 counties based on property taxes, and you can spend 2 or 3 times as much on the mainland from one county compared to another. In Hawaii, it's our private schools and our public schools where you can still spend 3 times as much. So one of the things I really, really wanted to fix was to have a dedicated source of funding for education. First year of office, we tried the 1% general excise tax. That didn't pass. Then for a union, for 2 years, we tried to get a constitutional amendment to raise property taxes to fund education. And it took so much work to finally get it on the ballot. And then we saw the Supreme Court. They basically said that people weren't smart enough to understand the question, so they were going to invalidate the question without ever letting the people vote. And I will tell you, it was so frustrating because it took so hard to get it that way. I think the larger debate, there were people that were just trying to make it seem like they were going to raise your property tax, and it was never the case. It was going over second homes over $1 million. We tried in future years to raise a hotel tax, trying to change the Constitution to guarantee funding. And so I'll regret that the most, that we weren't able to accomplish it. But the one thing I do live with is that we tried. And we organized the heart out to try to find funding for education. And so I regret that we weren't able to accomplish it, but I don't regret that. I know that we tried really hard to do so. And so I guess in some ways it's a regret, in other ways, I'm still proud of what we achieved.
Absolutely. And some of these things still remain as opportunities for the future. So the work doesn't stop just because Corey Rosenlee has left the building.
I know. I know how much you care about compression as well. I know you'll keep on fighting that one. I really hope you'll finally get it. Okay, so that we can vote one day and we can talk about it. You know, when we're sitting in our chairs one day, you know, our rocking chairs, and talk about those good old days, right? You were able to achieve it. I really hope so.
Absolutely. So, you know, when you came in and started, you had that gigantic omnibus bill that you're coming in and you're going to get everything done. But how has your perspective changed now that you've, you know, served for 6 years?
It's amazing how in 6 years you grow. I mean, I think when I got in, I wanted to change everything overnight. We put together the schools archaic bill. It was, I forget how long this bill was. It was like 40 to 60 pages. It would fix education overnight, raise the GET by 1%. It was crazy. You know, and I remember that first legislative session, we got $100 million for air conditioning, and the schools archaic bill had died. And I remember feeling bad about that, not realizing at the time how hard it was to get $100 million for education. I mean, I think that over those years, I think it was hard to take the accomplishments when they happened. I always felt bad that you never got more. You always want more. You know, I think that when we got the differentials, we didn't get compression on the same day. And I think at the time I was more disappointed about the compression than the differentials. And so I think that since that time, you know, I think you have to do things, you have to take things incrementally. You got to appreciate what you have to do. You know, even this year, it was interesting. It was when we were getting the contract signed, people forgot, you know, a few months earlier, we had looked at a 20% decrease of our salaries. And again, through our unity, we were able to fight that. And people were talking about, well, you didn't get compression. And it's like, you know, how difficult it was just to avoid pay cuts. You know, and that's something that, you know, we have to realize that things have to happen incrementally, but we still have to fight. And, you know, I think multiple times this year, they try to get rid of the differentials, and every single time our members rose up, and that's something that we'll have to continue to do. Absolutely correct. And when you talk about 20% and pay cuts and so forth, leads to the pandemic and so forth. How has the pandemic changed how we're doing things here at HSTA? I always think about, the one thing that I think about the most is that, you know, our union is made up of volunteers. You know, Osa as vice president does not get paid by the union. You know, our secretary treasurer, Logan Okita, she teaches full-time every day, and then afterwards has to volunteer. All of our chapter presidents don't get paid. And we have thousands of volunteers. And I think sometimes teachers don't realize how many of their fellow teachers volunteer and give up time to be part of the union. And some of the things that were happening is, and Hawaii is sort of unique, is we would have members on the Big Island that would have to get up at 3 a.m., drive 2 hours to get to the airport, fly over to Oahu for a one-day meeting. So having to do Zoom has actually given some of our teacher volunteers some of their time back in life. You know, people were able to spend more time with their families. So I think that that pandemic thing has been beneficial, even for me. You know, I would be oftentimes going off to neighbor islands. So I regret not being able to see everyone face to face, but it was nice to spend some time with family, because I could go to a meeting on Kauai and then Zoom over to another big meeting on Kona, and then still sit down with my family for dinner. And I do admit that I like that part of it. Yep, I totally agree with you. I'll just say that it also offers us the opportunity to make sure that we can offer things statewide as HSTA, that any person, if you're out in Hana or whatever, you still be able to get on and have
opportunities to learn about our union, and things that we'll put on via Zoom now. And you don't have to be on Oahu to be able to access some of this stuff. So that'll be good.
And we saw during our Institute Day, we actually had better participation because people didn't have to, drive all the way in. For our representative assembly meetings, we saw higher attendance because people could cook dinner and still be part of it. We have an organization, we have a lot of people that have their own families and take care of them. And so it was great to see that it actually increased participation. I know that that's something that you are going to be doing in the future, that we're going to be doing Institute virtually next year. And you're going to be doing what, Oahu and Neighbor Island, right, Osa?
Yes, we're going to combine all of our Neighbor Island Institute days into one so that it's a more robust opportunity for our Neighbor Islanders. So absolutely. And you talked about all the volunteers that we have, thousands across all of our schools, our school level leaders, our chapter leaders, our state leaders. What is your advice for someone who might want to get involved? They don't know where to start.
So sometimes this is the first thing to do. For all the teachers that are paying attention that have never been to one of our union meetings or representative assembly, attend once just to see what happens. And you may find that it's really something that you're interested in. And our chapter presidents, again, volunteers, are always looking for people to be part of committees and to get involved. And they're always looking for people that have special talents. Osa and I were just talking about the other day that we have a lot of our negotiations turning over, and we look for people. For all of our committees, we're always looking for people. So I really encourage you just to take that first step. Talk to a school level leader. We have a whole bunch of them, and just ask, when's the next representative assembly and can I attend?
Absolutely. So what's left that we still need to improve about public education in Hawaii? Do you have one or two things?
Oh, I have a list. I mean, I leave still wanting that we increase funding for education. I really wish we could make sure we pay our teachers better. And that goes back to the first one. People would just say, why can't we just pay our teachers better? You got to find the funding to do it. There's some great work we did on special education. The differentials is one. The funding formula is another one, but there's still so much work to be done there. I mean, I always feel so much empathy for our special education teachers. One of the things that I really deeply cared about was lowering class sizes. We got a bill finally passed, and the governor's now trying to veto something about actually, for the first time, monitoring actual class sizes, not just this fundamental staff to student ratio that means nothing. But that was something that we finally got passed this year. So I'm going to watch what happens over the next couple of days. And also, I hope you'll continue that one. We got to make sure that we got this money for air conditioning. I want to make sure that we actually do it right this time. It only costs maybe $1,000, $2,000 to actually do the classrooms, not $100,000, which they spent before. So I think that there's still so much work to be done out there. We finally got the Department of Education to do the authentic assessments, but it's really in the very early stages. We're trying to get more teachers to participate on it. I could just go on. There's so many things that we're still working on.
So many things, and so many things that we have to work on going forward. So, back in 2015 when you started, it was a very rocky start. And I will say, you were on Team Green and I was on Team Orange, and I ran against you, and my team lost, and your team came to power, and you've moved this union forward. And I was very glad to be part of your second term of your administration, previously as negotiations and then as your vice president. And it's been an honor to work with you and to see the changes you've made. And I hope that, we can continue to make positive change going forward. And I just want to thank you for everything you've done. You've set your family aside in order to do this work. And I thank your wife and your daughter for everything they've done. And I know you have some people to thank too, if not them as well. So go for it, Corey.
First of all, thank you so much, Osa. And as my words, for those of you who don't know Osa, I'm sometimes very envious. He's definitely a lot more organized than I ever was. I mean, he is very detail oriented. You know, Osa is just a really nice guy. I don't know of anyone that has something bad to say about him. I'm always jealous. That's not necessarily the way I always handle things. But he's a really good listener. It's important for him to listen. And he really tries to, work with people to get things done. And so I think, we're very lucky for our union. And he works so hard. I know I can't keep up with him. I'll tell you one of my favorite stories. One time we had a meeting, and he came to a meeting, and at the time he had a kidney stone, and he stayed in the meeting with the kidney stone. I would have been gone. Okay. When he was the vice president before the pandemic, he was at all the meetings, all weekends, working on the neighbor islands. And so, he's so passionate about what he does. He works so hard for our members, and he deeply cares. And so, Osa, you're going to be a great state president. I wish you the best. And I just want to say, to Logan and to Lisa, our incoming officers. Logan Okita is going to be our new vice president. Lisa Morrison, our secretary treasurer. We've been working together now for months as a whole team. I've been working with Logan and Osa for 3 years, and that was like, a little bit of a change. That was a little different, but we work so well together. And so I know they're going to do a great job. I want to thank all of you. It's truly, truly been a privilege to have been your state president for the last 6 years. I have so enjoyed meeting so many of you and just appreciate all the support. It's truly been a humbling and touching experience to have been your state president. And I want to thank all of our staff. It's taken for granted of how hard it is to all the work that needs to be done. And I think what prepared us over my 6 years is when the pandemic hit, we had such a great team already in that HSTA was in some ways, in fact, sometimes leading the state, whether it was making sure our schools were open safely, people wearing masks, social distancing, making sure people had professional development, even to make sure that there wasn't huge cuts to education that we've seen in previous economic downturns. And I think that all of our work together, both as a leadership team and our staff and all the work of all of our teacher volunteers across the state, that all of that, came to, a point there where we had to work together and we were ready to deal with that crisis. And so I just want to thank all of you. It truly has been a privilege. Thank you.
Thanks, Corey. And as you celebrate 4th of July, not only Independence Day for our country, but also the last day, you'll get independence from HSTA as well, as that'll be the last day of your presidency. We wish you the best. I know you're going to continue to contact me because you're full of ideas and they need somewhere to go. So I look forward to that, and I hope you will continue to share your ideas and do. I know you're going to do great stuff for Hawaii going forward, and we wish you all the best in everything you do in the future years. Thank you so much for this, Corey.
Thank you, Osa.
Aloha.